analysis using pivot tables. Introduction. Data analysis on a large set of data is quite often necessary and important. It involves summarizing the data, obtaining the needed values, and presenting the results. Excel provides pivot table to enable you to summarize thousands of data values easily and quickly so as to obtain the required results. Consider the following table of sales data. From this data, you might have to summarize total sales region-wise, month-wise, or salesperson-wise. The easy way to handle this task is to create a pivot table that you can dynamically modify to summarize the results the way you want. To create pivot tables, ensure the first row has headers. So click the table and click the Insert tab on the ribbon. So click on the table, click on the Insert tab on the ribbon, and then click Pivot Table in the Tables group. The Pivot Table dialog box appears. So this is the Pivot Table dialog box. As you can see in the dialog box, you can use either a table or range from the current workbook or use an external data source. So you can use an external data source. In the table range box, type the table name, so table 1, and then click on new worksheet to tell Excel where to keep the pivot table, and then click OK. So repeat, we have to give the name of the range, or we can select the range, but it's better to use the name, new worksheet, and then we just click OK. A blank pivot table and a pivot table fields list appear. So this is the pivot table fields list, and here we have the blank pivot table. And as you notice, we have here some new ribbon, pivot table tools. We have the Analyze and the Design ribbon. In case you are new to pivot tables or you do not know which fields to select from the data, you can use the Recommend Pivot Tables that Excel provides. So click the Data Table, click the Insert tab, so Insert tab, then click on Recommended Pivot Table in the Tables group. So again, click on the Data Table, click on Insert tab, and then click on the Recommended Pivot Tables in the Tables group. The Recommended Pivot Tables dialog box appears. So this is the Recommended Pivot Table dialog box. So in the Recommended Pivot Tables dialog box, the possible customized pivot tables that suit your data are displayed. So these are some of the Recommended Pivot Table dialog box. So once you click here, it will place here the preview. So click OK. The selected pivot table appears on a new worksheet. You can observe the pivot table fields that was selected in the pivot table field list. So these are the checked fields, and this is our pivot table. Pivot table fields. The headers in your data table will appear as the fields in the pivot table. So these are the fields. You can select or deselect them to instantly change your pivot table to display only the information you want and in a way that you want. For example, if you want to display the account information instead of order amount information, deselect order amount. So we deselected order amount and select account. Pivot table areas. You can even change the layout of your pivot table instantly You can use the pivot table areas to accomplish this. So this is the pivot table areas. In pivot table areas, you can choose what fields to display as rows. So here are the rows, and what fields to display as columns. So these are the columns. How to summarize your field or your data. Filters for any of the fields. So these are the filters. And when to update your pivot table layout. You can update it instantly as you drag the fields across area, or you can defer the update and get it updated only when you click on update. An instant update helps you to play around with the different layouts and pick the one that suits your report requirement. You can just drag the fields across these areas and observe the pivot table layout as you do it. So again, these are the areas. So you can drag the fields to rows or columns, and you can also drag these to rows and columns and vice versa. And this one is used to defer layout update. Nesting in the pivot table. If you have more than one field in any of the areas, the nesting happens in the order you place the fields in that area. You can change the order by dragging the fields and observe how nesting changes. In the above layout options, you can observe that months are in columns, regions and salesperson in rows in that order. Example, salesperson values are nested under region tables. Summarizing is by sum of order amount. No filters are chosen. So the resulting pivot table is as follows. So we have with the row labels. So we have the level 1 and level 2. These are the columns. So we have the months. In the pivot table areas in rows, click region and drag it below salesperson. So region and then drag it below salesperson such that it looks as follows. So originally region is up above salesperson. Now you drag region and place it below salesperson. So the nesting order changes and the resulting pivot table is as follows. So you have the name, and then we have the region. Name and then region. So you can clearly observe that the layout with the nesting order, region, and then salesperson yields a better and compact report than the one with the nesting order, salesperson, and then region. In case salesperson represents more than one area and you need to summarize the sales by salesperson, then the second layout would have been a better option. So this is the second layout. Filters. You can assign a filter to one of the fields so that you can dynamically change the pivot table based on the values of that field. Drag the region from rows to filters in the pivot table areas. So from region, we drag it to filters. The filter will filter with the label as region appears above the pivot table. In case you do not have empty rows above the pivot table gets pushed down to make space for the filter. So we have here region, and here the value is all. So we have here the columns, and we have here the rows. So the rows are now the names of the salesperson. You can see that salesperson values appears in rows. So that's what we have seen here. Months values appears in columns. Region filter appears on top of the default selected as all. So this one. And summarizing value is sum of order amount. Sum of order amount salesperson wise appears in the column grand total. So for every salesperson, we have here the sum. Sum of order amount month wise appears in the row grand total. So this is month wise. So this is the total for March, total for February. Click the arrow in the box to the right of the filter region. So this is the arrow. And a drop-down list with the values of the field region appears. So this is the drop down list. Click the option select multiple items. So this one. And check boxes appear for all the values. Select south and west and deselect the other values. And then click OK. So what is displayed here are only from south and west. So the data pertaining to south and west regions only will be summarized as shown in the screenshot given below. You can see that next to the filter region, multiple items is displayed, indicating that you have selected more than one item. However, how many items and slash or which items are selected is not known from the report that is displayed. In such a case, using slicers is better option for filtering. So that brings us to slicers. You can use slicers to have a better clarity on which items the data was filtered. So click Analyze. So that's the Analyze under the pivot table tools on the ribbon. So we have here two tools provided. So pivot table tools, we have Analyze and Design. So we click on Analyze. Then click Insert Slicer in the filter group. And the Insert Slicer box appears. So Insert Slicer box appears. It contains all the fields from your data. Select the fields region and month and then click OK. Slicers for each of the selected fields appear with all the values selected by default. Slicer tools appear on the ribbon to work on the slicer settings, look and feel. So we have here slicers, region and month. Select south and west in the slicer. For region, select February and March slicer for month. Keep control, keep press while selecting multiple values in a slicer. So you press control key and then click to select multiple values. So since we have selected south and west, February and March, so you notice here we have only here February and March, and these are the salesperson for south and west. So selected items in the slicer are highlighted. Pivot table with summarized values for the selected items will be displayed. Summarizing values by other calculations. In the example so far, you have seen summarizing values by sum. However, you can use other calculations also if necessary. In the pivot table fields list, select the field account and then unselect the field order amount. Drag the field account to summarizing values area. Sum of account will be displayed. So here we have sum of account. Click the arrow on the right side of the box. So we have here the arrow. In the drop down that appears, click the value field setting. So this is a drop down. We click on the value fields settings. So again, drag account. Sum of account will appear. Click on the arrow and this will appear, and then click on value field settings. The value field setting box appears. Several types of calculations appear as a list under summarize value field by select count in the list. So we have count, and the custom name automatically changes to count of account. So this becomes count of account, and then we click OK. So what we have here now is count of account. So the pivot table summarizes the account values by count. Pivot table tools. Follow the steps given below to learn to use the pivot table tools. Select the pivot table. So select the pivot table. The following pivot table tool appears on the ribbon. We have Analyze and Design. So analyze, some of the analyze ribbon commands are set pivot table options, value field settings for the selected field, expand field, collapse field, insert slicer, insert timeline, refresh data, change data source, move pivot table, solve order if there are more calculations, and pivot chart. For design, some of the design ribbon commands are pivot table layout, option for subtotals, option for grand totals, report layout forms, option for blank rows, pivot table style options, and pivot table styles. Expanding and collapsing fields. You can either expand or collapse all items of a selected field in two ways. First, by selecting the symbol plus or the minus symbol to the left of the selected field. By clicking the expand field or collapse field, so plus is the expand field, minus is the collapse field on the analyze ribbon also, so that's another way. But again, plus here is equivalent to expand field and minus is equivalent to collapse field. By selecting the expand symbol, plus or minus, to the left of the selected field, select the cell containing east in the pivot table. Click on the collapse symbol to the left of east. So click on this. That's a collapse symbol. So the result is that the details for east will be hidden. So all items under east will be collapsed. The collapse symbol minus to the left of the east changes to the expand symbol, which is plus. So this becomes a plus. You can observe that only the items below east are collapsed. The rest of the pivot table items are as they are. Click the expand symbol to the left of east and all items below the east will be displayed. So just like in this case. You can collapse or expand all items in the pivot table at once with the expand field and collapse field commands on the ribbon. Click the cell containing east on the pivot table, click the Analyze tab on the ribbon, and click Collapse field in the active field group. So this is the active field group, and we have here Collapse field. So all the items of the field east in the pivot table will collapse. So the items are hidden now. Click expand field in the active field group. So this is expand field, so there's a plus here. So that's also under analyze, and all the items will be displayed. We have report presentation styles. You can choose the presentation style for your pivot table as you would be including it as a report. Select a style that fits into the rest of your presentation or report. However, do not get overboard with the styles because a report that gives an impact in showing the result is always better than a colorful one, which does not highlight the important data points. So to do this, click East in the pivot table, click Analyze, click Field Settings in Active Field Group, and the Field Settings dialog box appears. Click the Layout and Print tab. Check Insert blank line after each item label. So, Analyze, Field Settings, Field Settings Active Group, then Field Settings dialog box appears. So this is dialog box, and then we click on Insert blank lines after each label. So blank rows will be displayed after each value of the region field. So here we have now blank lines. You can insert blank rows from the Design tab also. Click the Design tab. Click the Report Layout in the Layout group. Select Show in Outline. So Report Layout, Show in Outline form in the drop-down list. However, the mouse over the pivot table styles, a preview of the style on which the mouse is placed will appear. Select the style that suits your report. Pivot table in outline form with the selected style will be displayed. Timeline in pivot tables. To understand how to use timeline, consider the following example wherein the sales data of various items is given salesperson-wise and location-wise. There are a total of 1,891 rows of data. Create a pivot table from this range with location and salesperson in rows in that order. So we drag location and rows in salesperson in rows and product in columns. So you notice here the products are in columns. Sum of the amount in summarizing value. So we have here the sum of the amount. So again, location and salesperson here. Click the pivot table. So click on the pivot table, click insert, and then click timeline in filters group. So this is the filters group and here is timeline. The insert timeline appears. Click date and click OK. The timeline dialog box appears and the timeline tools appear on the ribbon. So we have here now the timeline tools. In the timeline dialog box, select months. From the drop down list, select quarters. So we have quarters. Click 2014 quarter 2. Keep the shift key pressed and drag to 2014 quarter 4. Timeline is selected to quarter 4 of 2014. The pivot table is filtered to this timeline. So this one is filtered to this timeline. Okay, that ends this lecture. So thank you very much for viewing this lecture.